Hey everybody, it's hwsteele. Today is April 9th, 2020, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about starting to create your own high-low type forecasts. I'm going to give you a very basic methodology that you can start to apply and see how well it works for you. See what your results are with that, and I'll go over that in a second. But what I want to talk about really quickly is the basic idea of these forecasts that in theory Gann used. And if we look at his 1929 annual forecast right here, which is what we've been looking at in all the other videos, he created this forecast. It's a high-low forecast, meaning each high goes to a low, so forth and so on. And in theory, he knows these special secret cycles that when you measure, let's say, just to keep things really simple, we'll say the cycle is 100 days long. And you measure all the pivots within that 100 days. All you have to do is pick an important high or low, measure all the pivots that happen in that 100 days, and in the next 100 days, those pivots should repeat with a fair amount of accuracy. It should be plus or minus 1 day, sometimes plus or minus 2 days. Obviously, you don't count the weekends. You would pull it back to Friday or push it to Monday, kind of a deal, or Tuesday if like Monday's a holiday, kind of a deal. So you have this cycle length, and in this example it's 100 days, and then it repeats, and then it repeats, and then it repeats. And you should have, in theory, the theory is like 80 to 90% accuracy rate if you found a good cycle. And then, of course, you can improve that accuracy rate and bring it up into the 90% with the inversion cycle. And then, of course, you can add price to these cycles and create price forecasts along with it, much like Gann's stuff right here. As in, he gave a price scale right here, but you could get, in theory, more accurate than this by adding the proper techniques. So that's the basic theory about how it works. You got to find the cycle length, then you test it in your market, whatever it is, and this is the Dow Jones Industrial Average in the 1929 year, which is what was in Gann's forecast. And then if it works out, you get that 80 to 90% accuracy rate, then you've probably found the proper cycle length, is how the basic general idea goes. If you've watched the previous videos in this series, you know that there's a genuine flaw in that theory due to repetitive price action and how easy it is to make pivots fit in repetitive price action. So I'll let you decide how viable that theory is. But in this video, I'm going to present the first of several methods that you can use where you don't need to find a special cycle length to create one of these forecasts. And let's be honest, if you can get that 85 to 90% accuracy rate, then isn't it just as good? I mean, think about that for a second. Shouldn't it be just as good? So let's talk about this. This is the equal distance method, and all that is you determine a number of pivots for a specific amount of time. For instance, in Gann's 1929 annual stock forecast, he had 50 pivots in 1 year. You determine the number of pivots in a year, 365 days, divided by 50 pivots, and that gives you an amount of time between each pivot. And then you just plot those in an equal distant fashion. So that's the first piece of information you need to know, is how many pivots are in a given point of time. And we're doing an annual forecast, so we're going to look for how many pivots are in an annual or a year, annual amount of time. And then we have to know the starting polarity, and we're just going to borrow that from Gann and assume that the polarity that we start with is a high for 1929 anyway. So obviously we can't split the days up into tenths, because this is the average days between each pivot, and you have 50 pivots in 365 days is 7.3. So what we can do is create a number sequence that closely mimics it. And here's what I mean. 7.3 times 3 is almost 22. It's 21.9. So if we create this sequence of 7 days plus 7 days plus 8 days, we create a sequence that is very close to that. So if we run this sequence over and over and over again throughout the years, just add 7 days and then 7 days and then 8 days, and then start over and do 7 more days, 7 more days, and 8 days, and continue that, we find that this is 3 pivots. And so if we multiply that 3 times 4 in 12 pivots, that covers 88 days. Okay? So our 7.3 times 12 is 87.6 days. So that's still within half of a day of what our 7 plus 7 plus 8 does for us. So it's accurate enough that we can go ahead and push it through the entire year, because by the end of the year it would be off by maybe a day or two. So within reason. Close that out. And when we start with January 1st as a high, right there I have it, it's actually on January 2nd because January 1st was not a trading day, it was a holiday. And then that would mean that we'd add 7, so that brings us to January 8th, and there's a low there, and then we'd expect it to move up, so forth and so on. And all I did was go through the year 1929, add 7 days, and then 8 days, and I allowed plus or minus 1 day. And obviously I didn't use the weekends. I either pulled it back to Friday or pushed it to Monday. And just doing that, also obviously a high had to move to a low and a low had to move to a high. And the high had to be higher than the low before it and after it. And so, I mean, obviously that part makes sense, but... And what we had here was a forecast produced that resulted in 1, 2, 3, 4 bad pivots, and that was it. So that means that 4 divided by 50, that means only 8% of our pivots were bad, which means that our accuracy rate was 92% for this year just by using the equal distance method. And if you'll notice, we went all the way through here, and that gives us a high in the very beginning of 1930, which matches our high in the very beginning of 1929. The difference is this would be January 1st. That's when we start counting our high here. And our high shows up on January 2nd here. So it's actually an extra day. So every few years we'd wind up with 49 pivots instead of 50. And if you actually work this through, you would see how that works out. But I'm not going to sit there and do that for you. If you're interested in this method, just to see how well it would work, I encourage you to go ahead and see how well. Pick a year and apply it to that year and see how many pivots work out. Now, my guess is, because I have not run this through all of the years from 1929 until now, but my guess is you'll get anywhere from 80 to 95% accuracy rate just with this methodology right here. Now, if that's the case, if you like what you see, then you'll probably want to watch the next video in a series where I start talking about how to calculate the price that we would expect the pivot to move to. That's not going to be in this video, that'll be in the next one, like I just said. So this is the very first and probably the easiest to apply methodology. Now the question is, how well does this method keep up through the rest of the years? Are there going to be some years where it just falls apart and is horrible and doesn't do very well? Possibly, but I'll let you decide by testing it out. So I encourage you to test this method out. See, pick 5 random years from the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Do the 50 pivots, the 7, 7, 8, start on January 1st, see how well it works out. And if you get in the 80 and 90% accuracy rate for all of the years, my question to you is this as good as finding one of those super secret cycles? So let me know what you think. Now, in the next video, we're going to attach, or I'm going to attach price to this forecast so we can anticipate and see how well that works out. And then in the video after that, in this series, I'm going to talk about a different method to create an annual forecast that has similar type results. So anyway, this is hwsteele, and I will talk to you in the next video.